In this video, we're going to learn some techniques to panelize and work with bodies in plasticity, so stay tuned. Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in this video, we are going to model something that is sort of sci-fi inspired and learn a couple techniques that we can use to panelize. Now, if you've seen the thumbnail of this video, you know what we're modeling. At this point in time, I actually don't know. We're just going to go through the process of creating something and explore these different techniques. So what we're going to do to get started is I want to begin with a cylinder. So I'm going to delete the cube and I'm going to start with a cylinder. We need to make sure that we do have our axes on because we want to snap to the origin and bring this up in the Z direction. Right click to say OK. Now at this point, this is going to be the basis for our design. I'm thinking that we're going to explore a couple of different areas. We're going to start to learn how to use curves with the knife tool. We want to look at using things like offset, duplicating edges. We want to use the pipe tool. And we just want to explore how we can use these techniques to quickly and easily make adjustments to our design. So for this design, I'm thinking that we want to add sort of a handle or something on the top. And to do that, I'm going to hit 1 on the numpad, which will go to my front view. And I want to begin using a curve. Now, something that you need to be mindful of when you're using curves, if you hover over an area, so you can see here it says XZ. This means that we're creating a curve on the XZ plane. This is snapping to Z. And here it says face. If I just start to create this curve and I rotate this around, it's snapped to that position on the cylinder, and then we just simply kept working in plane at that position. Now, this is generally not what you want. So if you're trying to do this, you want to make sure that you hold down the control key on a PC, and notice that now it's looking through the cylinder, and the tip next to our cursor says XZ, which means that we're working on the XZ plane. Now, if we happen to start up here and drag down, notice it says ZZ, which means that we're along the Z axis. And then we're not snapping to the cylinder. But if you happen to start over a solid object, make sure you pay close attention to what it says next to the cursor. So I'm going to just drag up and come down and maybe make some sort of handle here. And one thing that we want to do is we want to look at snaps. Now, what I mean by snaps is you can see currently it says parallel Z, which is telling me that my line is vertical and it's parallel to the Z axis. But if I want to get it horizontal to this point, I need to hover over it, hit and release shift, and then you can see that we're getting some indication of what those marks are. And now we have our intersection point. We can left click and start to drag up. Now, if we want to go horizontal or actually vertical to this point and stay parallel to that line, we're going to hit this endpoint, hit shift and let go. This will allow us to get vertical. And then I'm going to hover over this line, hit shift and let go. And this gives me my snaps for parallel and vertical to that point. I'm going to go ahead and just bring this over, come down and close it off. Now at this point, we simply need to select this profile and begin to pull it out in space. And I'm going to hit tab on the keyboard to make sure that it's like a mid-plane. Right click to accept, select the curve and delete it because we don't need it anymore. Now this is a separate solid body. During that offset or extrude, I could have combined them together. Sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes you maybe don't want to do it at that point. At this point, I want to keep it as a separate body. So I'm going to begin by selecting it, and then I want to select the edges to add some fillets. So I'm just going to hold down Shift. I'm going to grab all of these internal edges. I'm going to leave the bottom ones for now. And then as I pull this away, it's going to give me my fillet. I'm going to right-click to accept. I'm going to repeat this down here, selecting these two edges, and go ahead and just make a fillet. All right, so now we've got this sort of handle that goes on the top of this thing. It can be whatever you want, whether it's a battery, a canister, or a grenade, it doesn't really matter. But we want to figure out how to add some more detail to this handle. And we're going to do that first by adding some chamfers to the outside. And I'm going to hold down Control to select the other side. Right click and say OK. That's a good start. Next, I'm going to use the pipe tool. And to do this, I'm going to hover over this edge, hold down Alt, which will let me select the entire edge. And then we're going to use Shift D to duplicate. Now I'm going to move this till it looks like it's about in the center. It doesn't have to be perfect, but once it's about in the center, I'm going to right click. And if I wanted it exactly in the center, because everything is symmetric about that XZ plane, I could have actually just drawn it or projected that edge onto that plane. Again, if you're doing this as sort of a conceptual model, you don't have to worry as much about being that precise, but if you want to, just keep in mind that you can work totally on that plane and not specifically worry about moving it into the right spot. But now that we have this curve, I'm going to use the pipe tool, which is P on the keyboard. You can also find it down here. And by default, if we have an edge on a solid body, it'll default to cutting it, or W for the difference. If we have a curve, it's going to default to creating a new body. So what we want to do in this case is hit W and then select the solid body we want to remove it from. So this is going to give me this sort of recessed look, and it cut that geometry away. Now the next thing that we want to look at is offset. Now if I select a face and hit O on the keyboard, I can start creating an offset curve. Now this has a different implication to selecting a curve, because a curve is going to give us another curve. We can offset it inward or outward. If we select a face, it's going to take that outside edge and it's going to offset it inward only because there's no face outward from there. And it's going to slice or imprint on the face. Now, this is great because this allows us to now select this face and pull it in. Now, in some cases, you might be able to pull the offset all the way through. In other cases, depending on the geometry, you might actually need to hit E for extrude and then extrude it through as a cut. It just kind of depends on what you're working on. In this case, since this handle is completely separate, it works just fine. If it was combined with the cylinder, it might have a problem. You just kind of have to think about that. So that looks pretty good for just a basic handle. Maybe we want to turn this into some sort of spray can. So what I'm going to do is I am going to create a cylinder. Now, if I hit 3, notice I'm looking at the back. Well, it says right, but I'm looking at the back of however I drew that handle. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, the middle mouse wheel, and then just drag to the right twice. This is going to rotate it around. And now we're simply looking at it here. So what I'm going to do is a center circle. I'm just going to kind of find the center, maybe right here. Draw that circle, right click to accept. And then I want to bring this out and sort of maybe make a nozzle. This is going to be a new solid body. I don't want to combine it with anything yet. And I'm going to right click and get rid of that curve. Now the reason I want to make it a new solid body is because I want to move it. So I'm going to hit G, Z, and move it down in the Z direction, and then just sort of imprint it here. So not imprint, that's not the right word, but just kind of get it until it overlaps the solid. Now the main reason for doing that is because I didn't really want it up here. I just had a good snap that I could use up there. I could have also snapped to the edge of the cylinder. And now I can do things and modify this. So for example, I could add a chamfer here to sort of bring it down a bit. I can do the same thing on the front. So again, pull it in to make a chamfer. And once we have that, we can select the end face, E to extrude, sort of pull it out, and just kind of work with that shape a little bit. And maybe I want to move it down a little bit, so GZ, and just kind of get it until it's inside of that solid body. So again, it kind of looks maybe like a spray can. I don't know. It's just something we're working on. Add as much detail as you want. And if we want to, we can select this end face here, hit O to offset, and I want to bring a curve in. And then I'm just going to take this and pull it inward. So it just kind of looks like it's open. So pretty quick, pretty easy. Before I combine all these things together, I'm going to add a chamfer to this top edge. And then I'm going to hit Q, select the other solid bodies, and I want to do Q again. I want to combine all these together. You'll have to hold down the Shift key to make multiple selections. And now we've turned this into one solid body. So at this point, we're starting to get a bit more detail. It's starting to look like some sort of object, but it doesn't really look sci-fi. It doesn't really have those panelized features. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about using curves as knife tools. We're also going to be using curves as imprint tools. And then we're going to explore things like the pipe tool, which we've already used up here on the handle, but we're going to use the pipe tool and maybe even the coil or spiral. We'll explore that just a little bit. So the first thing I want to do is go to a side view, which again in this case is front, but the way I have the object drawn, this is the side of our object. And I'm just going to start with my line tool. So I want to create a little bit of a recess here. So I'm just going to make sort of this curve shape. And again, if I want those snaps, go back to this point, hit and release Shift, come down and come back out, right click, With the curve currently selected, I'm going to hit B on the keyboard, which is fillet, and allow me to round those off. And then I want to use this to imprint the curve. Now, imprint is essentially slicing the face, but keeping it as a single solid body. Now, if you don't know what a shortcut key for a command is, or if you don't even know what a command is called, you can hit F on the keyboard and start to type. So if I don't know that I want to imprint the curve, I can start typing curve and just see what comes up. And notice there's this one called imprint curve body. Now, if we do that, we select the solid body. What we did was we took that curve and essentially we imprinted it. We took that. Now, if I take this curve and hit O for offset and pull it outward, that new curve, I'm going to hit F and start to type imprint. Notice that imprint is a shortcut, Shift and I. Now, Shift and I will give us the same result as imprint curve body and imprint body body. This is sort of the top level command that those are underneath. So if we say imprint, select the solid body, gives us the exact same result. I don't need either of these, so I'm going to delete them. But there's another way that we could have done the same exact thing. We select the solid body, hold down Alt and click on that, and we do O for offset. We can create an offset, and depending on where your cursor is or what you have selected, you might only be able to go a single direction. You'll notice this one is only going inward. That's not always the case. If we are to make some geometry, so for example, if I take this little piece here and I go ahead and pull it in to sort of create that recess or that panelized feature, I can now select this outside edge, let's say Alt, and hit O, and I should be able to offset that in both directions. Now you can see it's going inside and outside depending on where the cursor is. Right click to accept. And now I'm going to select, hold down Alt and select, P for the pipe tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create this as a new body. So I'm going to hit B for new body, right click to accept. I'm going to hide that. I'm going to do the same thing again, Alt to select this curve, P for pipe. This time I'm going to make the pipe a little bit larger. So just a little bit bigger, right click to accept. And then I want to select its edges and just add a slight chamfer or a fillet, just to give it a little bit more detail. Again, depending on the direction you pull your cursor, you're going to either add a chamfer or a fillet. And then if we bring this back, let's go ahead and right click up here and hide the edges for now. So if we bring that back, you can see we've essentially created this little recess for that piece to sit in. That's a separate solid body. You can turn it on and off. And now we've got this extra little detail or feature there. So a neat way to do that really quickly with a curve on a surface or an edge is to just simply create a pipe cut, and you can create a larger pipe cut and a smaller pipe, and they kind of fit and sit together. Let's also go ahead and let's hold down Alt and select this edge, O to offset, and bring this one in. I'm going to go ahead and bring it in a bit far. I want to select this face right here, and I want to pull this in a bit farther. So it kind of looks like there's a cylinder on the inside of it. Now, sometimes you might want to create this in a different way. Maybe you want to actually create a cylinder on the inside, completely delete or remove that, and create a separate solid body as a cylinder. You can totally do that as well. A lot of times these are just visual effects, and you don't really need a true multiple body part here. So you could combine everything together. But again, this gives us the option to add a fillet or a chamfer and just create those unique sort of paneled details. Let's go one step further on this. I'm going to hit 1 on the numpad, and I'm going to use my line tool, and I'm going to come in over. Now, if we come over to this edge and we hit and release Shift, notice that it does give us some snaps, but we're not getting parallel like we did before. You have to grab the actual geometry, so in this case an edge, and notice that we're also seeing face here where the cursor is. Now when we have that, again, if we hold down Control, it'll allow us to look through that face, but we're no longer getting that snap. We're not able to actually go to that snap point. So one thing that you might end up doing is you might end up hiding some of the solid bodies or duplicating curves so that you can replicate them. In this case, I don't want to sketch on the face, so I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm just going to gradually make something that is a bit different. So I'm going to just want to come up vertically and then maybe out at an angle. So if I go back to that sort of side view, you can see the reason that this is tricky is because things went a bit crazy, right? So these lines are all over the place in 3D, and this is what happens when you start to rotate and create these curves, and you're not careful with where they're snapping to. So I'm going to delete this curve, and we're going to start again. And basically what I want to do is I want to create a curve where I can wrap a coil onto this part. So I'm going to come over, right click, I'm going to hit B for fillet. And again, depending on where your cursor is, you might have to drag different directions. And this time, instead of imprinting this, I want to project this curve. So again, F on the keyboard, I'm going to start typing curve and just look at my commands. So we have project curve body, which seems like exactly what we want. We're going to click on that, select the target body, right click, and then that original curve, I'm going to delete it. So what we have here now is a curve that sits on the surface of our solid. So that allows us to essentially create that, and we can use it for things like sweeps or pipes. And it's not part of the solid, which means if I hide it, we haven't divided the face up. So that might be an important technique depending on what you're modeling. You might want the curve and not the imprint version of it. So just make sure that you understand and play around with these different options. But I'm going to select this curve, P for pipe, and I'm just going to right click to create that as a new solid body. So once again, we can repeat that with the curve. We can select the curve and say pipe. This time I want to use it as a difference, and I can select the solid body, and then I can hide or get rid of that curve. Now, once again, I'm going to just select these edges and add a small chamfer or a fillet there, depending on your intent. Bring back that solid body. And once again, we sort of made that little recess feature where it looks like we've got this coil or this wire there. Any of these details that you want to add, just think about the downstream effect of either splitting that face up using imprint or by creating a curve on a surface by projecting it. Now there's a couple of other things that I do want to talk about. I know we've been at this for over 15 minutes now, but I haven't talked about curve with the knife tool yet, and that's something I do want to focus on. So we're going to use the line tool, and notice in the bottom right-hand corner that it says knife and undo. It says command undo. It's the Mac command, but Control Z would be undo as well. But what we want to do is hit K on the keyboard for the knife tool. And in this case, I actually want to draw directly on this face. So what I'm going to do is just draw a line. I'm going to come down here, come back, come over. Now, if we want this snap point, we can get it here, but notice that it says it's on Y. Now, if it's on Y, that means we're not on the face, and that's a problem. So we do need to be careful here. When we have this using the knife tool with a curve, which can be, the curve can be a line, it can be a spline, a circle, whatever. Now we've actually taken that and divided the face up directly. We've created a new curve. We haven't used it to imprint it, which would give us the same result. But sometimes you just want to draw on the face. And again, we can use this technique to create these sort of different like set-in regions. So once I'm happy with that, I'm going to grab a couple of edges, maybe add a fillet or a chamfer in here. Let's go ahead and do that. Right click, grab the outside, add a chamfer, and then maybe we'll want to take this face and hit O to offset it inward, right click to confirm, select this face and maybe pull it out just a little bit. Grab its outside edge, and there we go. So it kind of just looks like a little feature that's set in using in this case, a line curve as a knife tool. We're able to add a couple of just interesting, unique features pretty quickly. Now there is one more thing that I do want to look at here, and that is going to be the spiral tool. Now with the spiral tool, this could get a little tricky given the fact that we are working in the solid body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to create this spiral on the face. We can increase its height, and I'm going to right click to accept it. I'm going to hit P for the pipe tool, but I'm going to hit B for a new body. I'm going to right click to confirm, and I want to hide a couple of these other solids, and I want to focus my attention on, let's go ahead and hit 3, hold down Alt and just move our way around. we want to get rid of the portion of the coil that is underneath here. So I don't really need all of it. So I'm just going to create a rectangle that is sort of below, right click to confirm. And then I'm going to use that rectangle to just cut away. So we'll hit tab, we'll hit W for difference and use it as a cut tool to cut away from that coil. Then I can delete the coil, delete the rectangle, bring the other solids back. And then if we want to, we can combine these together. So we can use Q, and now we've added sort of that coil feature to that inside piece. So these are all ways in which we can quickly add detail without being super precise and spending a lot of time having to define everything in 2D. We can use knife tool on any of the curves. We can do that on the surface. We can use offset, and we can use things like offset face and extrude, or just simple ways that we can create solid geometry and move them around until we're happy with their position. So now I just want to go to a perspective view. I'm going to turn off my axes and my X-ray. I'm going to turn on the render mode and just take a look at the detail that we created. So overall, it just kind of looks like maybe a spray can or something like that. But overall, I think we've added quite a bit of detail without doing a whole lot of legwork here. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this. If you have any questions on what you saw here, or you want to see more content like this, where we're going through a specific techniques but applying them to a model like this, please let me know. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.